So there is a saying that people don't leave bad organizations, they leave bad bosses. I'm sure you heard of that. But why do people leave bad bosses? What makes a boss a bad boss? And the difference I feel, in my humble opinion, is that the difference between being a manager and being a leader. Managers can be very toxic, whereas leaders are actually nurturing. Both of them have the same goal to achieve the objective set by the corporation. The difference is that one does it without having any empathy and not caring on how the results uh, are achieved, but the other does a right balance between doing that and building the leaders and the task force for the future. What is the difference between this, and why are leaders more important than managers? Hear me talk to my next guest, Norman MacDonald, who I'm very fortunate to have known for many years. And he talks about not just about being a prankster, but he talks very seriously about the importance of leadership versus managers. So, as I said in my introduction, leadership and management are two different things. I think managers are identified by organizations. Leaders are born with the skills, and they're driven to better themselves for the welfare of the organization that they work for, and also more importantly, for the people around them. And I also believe that leadership has a huge connect with humanity. So today with me, I have an individual who has been somebody that I've had the pleasure and sometimes traumatized to have worked with a couple of decades ago. But the funny bit is that when a number of us who worked with him all those decades ago got together on social media, he's always remembered with a lot of fondness and a warmth. And that got me thinking about this individual as a human being, and also as a leader. And I think he's left his footprints on the lives of the people that he's worked with. The lady that I'm married to considers this guest of mine to be her mentor in her professional life and has learned a lot from him. I have been traumatized having worked with him, and I still do every now and again when I talk to him. Nori to his friends, but to the rest of us and to me, Norman MacDonald. So, Norman, welcome to my podcast, A Pint of Imbecile Wisdom.
Well, thank you very much. I couldn't have put that better myself had I written it, Dom, which I quite clearly hadn't.
Of course. So, Norman, before we get into the gist of our conversation, talking about humanity, leadership, corporate life, and how people are losing themselves in it, why don't you give my audience a little bit of a background about who is Norman MacDonald?
So I think, Dom, I'm somebody that stands by his values. I'm somebody that is prepared to take calculated risks on behalf of the team. I'm somebody that takes responsibility, and I think that's important. I think people that work with me realize that they can rely on me, and I think that's very important in any leadership. That we maybe use the word, or we overuse the word, trust. But there's plenty of people in jobs now, Dom, that don't trust the people they work with. They don't trust their decision making. They don't think they should ever be in that position. So I'd like to think that people trust me. It's one of the founding values I have. That whatever I'm saying, I also believe in. I'm not doing it. And I've walked away from a couple of positions where the management structure above me hasn't been right, or it hasn't been correct. And I think if you were to say to Norman's friends, what's good about Norman, I think they would say that I was consistent, but you would also say actually he's inconsistent because you don't know what he's going to do next. Depends which next bolt of electricity hits his head. But I like to think I'm consistent. I like to think that I'm reliable. I like to think that I'm trustworthy and honest. I believe that nothing's achieved without hard work. I don't think that you can get the best out of your team unless you have a high degree of empathy. You have to understand what's going on above and below the surface. And although we're talking today about leadership, I don't know how you would train those things, Dom, if they weren't at least partially in you. And I had a fairly, I wouldn't say strict religious upbringing, but I was brought up in the Presbyterian faith. And I think that gave me good values from a very, very young age. I knew what I should be doing and why I should be doing it. And I think that many of the things that I bring into management now were instilled in me very early in life.
Correct. And I agree with everything that you said, and I believe everything you said, except for one point, Norman. You said your friends, and I know this very well. You have no friends, Norman, and
Sure.
let's not lie about that. So,
Sure. Yeah. So maybe for friends, I should have said people that have been affected by me over the years.
That sounds more realistic. Oh, yeah, thank you. So, Norman, okay, now coming to leadership, okay. Actually, no, before I go into that, Norman, I want to ask you a question. It's sort of personal. Every time people are in a room or they're on a social media call or on a WhatsApp Zoom call, and the name Norman MacDonald gets dropped in, and there's two very common expressions. There's a shaking of the head going on, gosh, and then there's this full sort of overflow of warmth and affection and respect for you, and that's quite strange, being the number of people that you've traumatized with your pranks. Why do you think that is happening, Norman?
I think people potentially could separate those two things. So there's Norman MacDonald, the prankster, which has been a big chunk of my life. I've enjoyed doing it. And as you know, you've also been party to some of them and you've also contributed to them. So
I never have. For the record, to my audience, I have never contributed to them.
Yeah. Or I should say he's never prevented them from happening. That's probably safer, even though he said full awareness of them. And then so I think that I've always wanted the work to be fun. It has to get done, Dom, as you know, and it has to be done in a professional way. But that doesn't mean that it has to be serious. Now, one thing that I want to talk a little bit about when we talk about leadership is the difference between stress and pressure. And it's so important that people understand that difference because it's a key part of how you lead by example. Pressure is good, and it's something that an individual can put on themselves to improve their performance. So what would pressure be? You're writing a song, you get it half down, you spend another hour on it, then another hour on it, you keep working on it, the next day you go back to it. That's the pressure to get that song right. Now, if someone above me had said, or I'd said to that person, I need that song by 6 o'clock and that's it, that's stress and that's bad. So I like to think that a lot of what I've done in my management style is allow the person to put sensible pressure on themselves, because that way I think we get better results. I think, most of the pressure is good if it's the individual putting it on themselves. And I've removed stress from within the work environment because although we all had deadlines to meet and although we all had targets and everything else, I wanted to de-stress the work environment, but I wanted to maintain a degree of pressure that we could put on ourselves for better results. And I think that style works with most people, Dom. But I see the worst examples of stress in work environment because people do not apply the same rules.
Norman, I'll come to that, but why? I'm genuinely trying to break my head on this. Why are you remembered so fondly and respected even 2 decades after people have stopped working for you?
Do you know, I wish I knew the answer to that, Dom, because I think, I've pretty much, from when I've been able to remember, I've always been a jokester, a prankster. I've never taken anything too seriously. So I think people like the fact that I could be both professional and unprofessional in the same sentence. I would maybe take a situation that was quite serious and needed to be done and produce humor out of it. And I think it's quite a challenging thing for people to do, because when you get a lot of things thrown at your desk and you've got to get them done, you can very rarely find humor in it. But I like to think I can find humor in anything or in most things. So I think maybe one of the reasons that people do remember it was that they've probably never met anyone like Norman MacDonald before that likes to get the work done. But actually, it has to be fun and it has to be funny and it has to be pleasurable for people. Otherwise, I'm not getting pleasure from it. Bringing fun to others also brings fun to me and enjoyment, and creating the right relaxing environment to work in, Dom, you'll get the best out of people. If people hate coming to work, or if they hate working for you, or they hate you as a person, you might never know about it, in all honesty, you don't know what's going on inside a person's head. But I always think that I managed to get the trust of people. We're making that environment pleasurable, Dom. I know it sounds strange because you know that we worked together in a big American organization. There was a lot of challenges. There was a lot of rules that we had to work by. But I like to think that office was a great place to work.
Yeah, I think so. So Norman, now coming back sort of a little bit to the topic I want to focus on, managers versus leadership. Okay. Now, as I said earlier on when I started this podcast, I think, managers are nominated by organizations. Sure. And I think leaders are made by themselves. Okay. And there's a huge difference. I personally believe that managers bring a toxic element to an environment, whereas leaders kind of nurture the environment and let people grow. And based on some previous conversations I've had with you, and as I said, somebody who you've mentored is the individual that I'm married to. And she always says that, she considers you to be the mentor of her professional life. And even today, about 15 years after having stopped working for you, many a time she'll share her day with me, and she'll say, it was a difficult decision. It was tough, but this is what I did. And then she says, this is what Norman would have done. And the focus is being on doing the right thing and doing the honest thing. And I think that's a trait of leadership rather than a trait of being a manager. How do you see the two different roles here? And what's your take on it?
Sure. You made a good point, Dom, in the introduction there about leadership and management. They're not the same thing. And being a leader is not the same as leadership either. So when you said leaders are often born with them, with certain characteristics and certain traits that makes them natural leaders, I totally agree with you. I think it's very difficult to train leadership. You can train people to be better leaders, but there's much of what comes from within leadership that's already in you. It's a trait, if you're not greedy and if you're not ambitious for yourself, but ambitious for others. If you're keen to develop people, you want to empower people, you want to train them in the right way, you're keen to build a team. If that's not in you, those are things that's very difficult to train. And also, they're very difficult to measure. You can't measure the quality that easily of a person's mind. You don't really know what they're thinking. So I think it's very important to separate leadership from leading, because we know Hitler was a leader and Stalin was a leader. At the end of the day, that's if your definition of a leader is that. But I mean, was it the right kind of leadership? So clearly not. So I think that I don't want to say it in an immodest way, but I always feel that, from being captain of the football team to being an officer in the boys' brigade, that I found it very easy to lead from an early age. No one taught me it. The skills were, I guess, already there. There's a lot of areas where I'd get 0 out of 10, and there might be 1 or 2 areas where it came naturally to me. And I think one of them was leadership. And it made it easier for me, Don, when I was put into a position of management, that leadership skills would come to the fore. So I think that's where it is. I pretty much from the age of 23 been in senior management positions all my life in the UK and abroad. You know that sometimes people say that what generates a managerial appointment, or we can say, let's say, a promotion, is really the ambition of the person. And people that are overambitious are not necessarily good leaders. So your ability to do the job has very little to do with leadership. Your ability to do the job is that you've learned a set of skills in a very specific way, and you've become good at them. So, for instance, if I was a good salesman, there's a chance I could get promoted to sales manager, and therefore are running a team of salespeople. Now, I'd be able to instruct them on the best way to do it. Again, that's very much falling in line with a management leadership. Within a management structure. So I think quite often the people that become managers are good at their job at a certain level, and then they get overexposed when they become a manager of people or go more senior to become a director. I think the people that can do it better is the ones that have the product knowledge, but were almost born to lead. They have the other qualities that are not, you can't, how would you be able to measure a person's self-confidence or a person's integrity or a person's ability to empower? You can't really measure those areas. You can say that this guy's a good salesman because he hit his target for the last 5 years. So maybe how we measure managers is very different for how we would measure leaders. So I know there's always, when you're talking about leaders and leadership, there's a lot of words get bandied around, but two of the things that I think are very important, if leadership is about creating a team, because by the word leadership means you're looking after a team. I always fostered a culture within any company when I've gone that no one succeeded at anyone else's expense. Now, you'd have to know what that meant internally, that people wanted to help each other or wanted to stay a little bit later, or even a culture where you say, can I help you with that? Don't be frightened to come and ask. Or, and I would say to somebody, look, if you feel as though you're falling behind in your work or you're finding it all too much, you come and tell with me and we'll deal with it together and we'll deal with it as a team. So leadership is about that culture of no one's going to advance or grow and develop, and someone else would suffer as a result of that one. Tough decisions, Dom. If you're a leader, you have to make some tough calls sometimes with people. I'd like to think that over the years, people that have left the business for one reason or another with me have all left because of their fault, not because of the environment that we created. So in other words, there are people, and you would know who they were, who failed in their role. Now it's a job of a leader or as a manager to try and develop people, to try and get them to their full potential. And the clue there is in full potential, because one weak or weakening member of the team can affect the whole team. It can affect the stability of the business. So a leader does have to make tough decisions. So it's not like leadership is about being kindly all the time, or being nice and being pleasant. Sometimes somebody has to leave the business, or sometimes somebody has to be disciplined for X, Y, and Z, because you're not them and they're not you, and they have to learn that the rules have got to be observed, but that doesn't mean that you take the fun out of the organization. I like to think that we've fostered a culture where there was support for your colleagues. Now, that in a lot of organizations, and I've worked for one or two in the UK, where actually you're almost encouraged to beat the next guy. That's not the kind of environment that creates healthy working environments. I think that's why there's a lot of people, Dom, suffer from stress without knowing it, because if my guy next to me achieves 98% and the guy next to him does 97 and I do 92, I'm regarded the worst of the three. So I think I removed that competitive element and created a team where, if we were successful, it's because we done it together. And if we weren't successful, it's because we hadn't done it together and we needed to learn and develop it. Why people would remember it many years after it is, I think, Dom, because it was a very unique environment. It was one where we had an enormous amount of success. Anyone that came to visit that office could sense there was a different culture, a different environment. And I think I contributed towards that, but also I think the team contributed towards it by adapting very quickly to that style of management. Coming into meetings, knowing there would be laughter among the seriousness. Coming into meetings where maybe I was more silly than they could have imagined, or even the occasion called for. I think that's the other thing, that although I'm pretty consistent, I'm also incredibly unpredictable, and that I guess at times I was capable of fairly anything. People like that, Dom. I think it was, I said this to somebody once, it was almost like the extension of a TV series comedy in the office. That's that's probably what it felt like. It felt like we're script writing for a comedy sometimes, but the work got done and people remembered it. I think also, Dom, you have to have a degree of empathy for people if you're a leader. I'm talking about different for a manager. I would know if someone needed help. I would know if somebody wanted help. I would know their personal circumstances. I used to know most of the team beyond their work environment. So I would know how many sisters they had and where everybody was. I would know if somebody in the family was ill. So I think that's also about leadership, isn't it? It's about trust. Absolutely. And people need to know that you do care. And, it's not something you can fake, caring and empathy. I don't think you can fake it. I think it has to be in you, or it's not in you. And I think I always took responsibility, at least for that side of the business, making sure that we became friends as well as work colleagues.
So, Norman, you said a lot of wonderful things there about the working styles and leaderships. So why do you think that the world has become so toxic, especially in the corporate environments? I mean, I have worked in some great organizations, and I still continue to do so. And I think there are some wonderful people, in these organizations that I've had the pleasure to work in. But there's also that toxic element where there's that greed, there's that competition, there's a backstabbing, and it's not, you can't pinpoint it down to a certain culture or a country of people of a certain ethnic, race or something. What do you think is going wrong, especially, and it seems to be getting worse, okay? Because when I talk to so many of my colleagues who work for different multinational organizations, they talk about it, when we meet for drinks and whatever. And I do believe that it's getting worse. What is the thing that we need to stop, put on the brakes, and step back?
Well, I think the core of all the toxic environments is money, and it's large organizations looking for shareholder value or looking for a return on investment. So that really drives in many, not in all organizations, clearly it doesn't with charities and a whole lot of other stuff. But if you're in a corporate environment, and it's, unless it's a non-for-profit organization, but if you're in a corporate environment, your judge of success is, no one will say to you, my goodness, you created a really good team there. No one will say to you, well, you really nurtured and influenced the people. They'll say to you, did we manage to hit our sales target? Did we manage to hit our P&L targets or our financial objectives? So you're not judged on your leadership skills within most organizations. That there are some cultures slightly different from others, but success for most organizations is a delivery of the bottom line. And I think that produces a toxic environment, because it means that arrow is very much pointed to a measurable performance, a set of criteria, a set of data. You won't be judged, Dom, on whether you created the best team ever, wherever one of your team members enjoyed their work and were developing. That very rarely comes into the conversation. Did you or did you not deliver on the investment targets or the sales targets or the profitability targets? How many times when the companies I've worked for, Dom, where the only conversation is about a number?
Norman, I agree with that. But keeping that aside, and in all due respect, corporations exist to make money, right?
Sure.
Absolutely. But keeping that aside, let's talk about the human elements. There's somebody who comes into the organization at a junior level, and let's just say that this person is going to stay there for the next 20, 30, 40, 50 years. And I know people who've done that as well. But they tend to evolve over the years, and they kind of tend to lose those values of humanity, of their upbringing, and get sucked into a toxic environment that they might even create themselves. And by the end of that journey, they're no longer the human being that they used to. Why do you think that is happening? And what can we do to focus on that?
Dom, I think when you, if we take an example maybe of a hospital or a health board, the person that's at the front end is all about saving lives and providing good care, and they've chosen that profession because a large chunk of what they wanted to do was to help others. I mean, you don't go into the health service unless that's your number one basic criteria. So that person in the organization that's working at the hospital level is very focused, and they're not subject to the same types of pressure and stress, but they are, of course. They're getting sick people going through, and it's a very tough environment. When you go higher up the ladder, there's a manager within the health board that will be targeted with getting a certain number of operations done, a certain, keeping the costs down because they're working on budgets. So I think it's not an organization itself per se, Dom, that would create a toxic work environment. Sometimes it's where you sit within that organization that kind of creates it. And because your question's a two-part one, what would you do about it? The first part is to try and understand, I think, that a person may well be a good leader, but the organization prevents them from becoming a great leader, simply because every conversation, and I've had it in a couple of companies I work for them, I used to have a weekly call with 3 or 4 of the directors, and the conversations were all about money and about sales and how you're going to turn it around. So, there was never a conversation that said, how's this manager doing, or, anything like that. The conversation was about money. And, that can turn your head, because you're also no longer thinking about the team. You're thinking about, how can I deliver on the numbers? And it is toxic. And the larger, if you're working for a big bank, Dom, you can see the amount of stress that's in there on profitability and deal dealing. You know that there's going to be a very little opportunity for you to not be toxic, because you're so geared up in that industry to be better than the next bank, but also better than the individual in the next desk to you. And I think it's target related. I think it's there's a lot of competition out there. So if you're making cars, Tom, at the very, very top, your job is to hold responsibility for all the thousands of workers that you've got for you, sell more cars, work with the agents, improve the performance. So I think that, everything that creates a toxic environment can be found by the need to generate profits, because that becomes the overriding conversation, doesn't it? There are organizations where it's not based on profit, where there is also a toxic environment. And I think that just comes down to the individual. There's many individuals, Dom, in senior positions that shouldn't be there, because if we extract it from leadership, what is management all about? The guidance of others, managing assets. There are plenty of people in positions that, have no idea how to make all that work together and put themselves under stress. And when a person's under stress, it's normally passed on. So in fact, everyone else within that organization feels under stress as well. So I think one of the things that you need to do as an individual is, especially if you're in your senior position, is be able to absorb that stress. Don't see it as, if somebody says to me, I need to get this by Tuesday, my first answer would be, that's impossible, but I can let you have it by Thursday. And if he says, I'm sorry, but I need it by Tuesday, I'll say, then you're going to have to get someone else to do it, because I've already told you when I can deliver it for. I want it to be right. I want it to be correct. I want it to be professional, and I can't do it by Tuesday. So what I used to do and still do is remove that stress by just getting the deadlines right and controlling it. Now, that might infuriate those above me, right? You have to deliver it by Tuesday. I says, okay, I'll deliver it by Tuesday, but it won't be in the format that I'll be proud of, and I'll put that on the email. So I think the ability to absorb stress so it doesn't work its way down to the next level is quite important. And actually, I've always been able to push stress back up the way. I think I created more stress, not deliberately, for those that sought out to pass stress on to me. So as an objective, I don't mind pressure. I thrive on it. I like it. It makes me better. But please don't pass stress on to me, because I'll just have to sort of bat it back up the way. So the team works in a stress-free environment. Now, a lot of workplaces are toxic. You can find toxicity in government. When someone gets to the head of the party, it doesn't make them a great leader. I'm sure you'll see within politicians all over the world that, there's very few of them, but there are some examples of where they're just naturally great leaders and they have the respect of the people. And there's other ones where they've simply become dictators, and you know which countries we'd be referring to. So yeah, there's a lot of toxic organizations out there. There's very few organizations that work when they're looking for a return for the shareholders. There's very few organizations where it's completely stress-free. It doesn't exist.
Yeah. So Norman, look, taking the toxic environment, taking stress and pressure and the greed of mankind, so to speak, let's now throw in another challenge into the mold, and that's the international cultural challenges that come in. You've been somebody who's worked with a number of people from different nationalities. I know you've had a very demented sense of humor about it, but you've actually worked with people from different cultures and different belief systems and so forth. So what would be your tip about working with people who are not from the same background, or who speak from the same language, or come from the same upbringing as yourself? What are some of the things that you've been able to pick up along the way?
And Dom, that actually sets a unique set of challenges where maybe a person's religious beliefs, a person's cultural beliefs, a person's education level, all of these things can affect their ability to absorb what it is that you need them to do. Because at the end of the day, as well as talking about all the leadership things, I need people to be able to do their job well. So we talked about empathy. I think there's got to be an understanding, and I think we've got to be inconsistent, but I think we've got to nurture people. You very rarely, when someone joins the organization, or even if you've been out for a while, you very rarely get the finished article, Dom. I think that's the truth. And if I was to put 10 people in a 1 kilometer race, somebody's going to win it and somebody's going to struggle to finish. And I think you just have to understand within your team, where are people that you can give certain tasks to, and where there are others that won't do it. I would say the good thing about multicultural environments is that, the moment you step through the door, it doesn't really matter to me where you came from. I'm not interested in your religion or the color of your skin. I'm interested in the quality of your mind, and I'm interested in how well you treat others. That's very important to me. I will always treat people well, and I want people to treat the people that are below them well and in a similar fashion as well. So it's the quality of the mind that's important. That's what I'm looking for. Is this person capable of developing? Is this person sincere, honest, hardworking, trustworthy? Those are the qualities that I'm looking for. It won't come from any one environment. I would never say this person, because they came from India, would be better than a person from Bangladesh. I've never had those thoughts. I think you've tried to find through the recruitment process what qualities you need for that person to be successful, and try and find out at the interview stage whether that person's going to fit into that environment. I can tell you, Dom, there's a lot of people would not have fitted into our environment, the one that we created. It's just not for them. So you have to find people that have that kind of relaxed, socially, they're very mature, that can have fun in their work and pass fun on. And, there are certainly maybe 20% of the population are too serious to be successful in that environment. Doesn't mean they're bad at their jobs. It just means that I don't think they would have enjoyed it. So yeah, multicultural has a different set of challenges than it would be if it was 10 Scotsmen. But I always say, Dom, you never know what's going on inside someone's head. And it's very important to get to know what their capabilities are.
Yeah. Norman, I watched recently, I'm part of the diversity and inclusion movement within our organization, and I work for a great organization. And we were watching a video done by one of the banks here in Asia. And there was this Asian woman who was a vice president at the bank level. And she said, many a times, because English isn't my first language, I'm looked upon as not educated enough, and it got me thinking, because, we have grown up in a society, at least this generation has grown up, where, the major influence has always been from the West coming down to the rest of the world. But that's changing now. There's a balance where the rest of the world are bringing an equal amount of maturity, knowledge, and wisdom onto the table. But I think that the cultural balances are not there yet, because we still live in our generation, we still live in a mindset where people predominantly from the West, I'm sorry to say that, feel that they know it all. They are far more superior in terms of their knowledge and their education and so forth. And I find that the younger generation are kind of understanding that and bringing a balance to it, and respecting the fact that people from the other parts of the world also have, either more or equal knowledge than them.
Oh, absolutely. And listen, I've found inherent racism. We can talk about the British if you like. There is a kind of this person can only do that. I've never really felt that, in all honesty. But I would just remind people that it wasn't Jaguar that bought Tata, and it wasn't that bought Jaguar. So I think that more and more, and if we want to talk specifically about India, I think India is on the brink of having enormous potential, especially as the world order changes. I think a lot of companies that manufacture in China now will need to think about where they're going to manufacture in the future. India's ready. It's on the threshold.
I think so, Norman, but this was more about the cultural mix that the world is coming into at the moment.
Sure.
You could bump into, and I say this respectfully, you could bump into a guy who's my color, and on the street, and say, where are you from? And he's going to say Birmingham, and that's something that you don't think of. You know what I mean? So the world has become a mixing, melting pot, and I think we have so much to learn from each other than actually like traditionally drawing lines, and be it about cultural upbringings or so forth. So I think that's another challenge that our generation has gone through.
Yeah.
They call it unbiased prejudice or whatever it is, but at the end of it, it's just racism, right?
Yeah.
And
Sure.
and these leaders from the East now taking over huge corporations like Google and
Yeah.
Microsoft and so forth. These are like leading technology companies in the world,
Mhm.
So, and it's not about which side of the planet is taking over control, but it's about the right people being there at the right
Sure.
positions, regardless of their religions, caste, race, or sex.
Sure. And as the world becomes more global, there's more opportunities for people. And if you have the right credentials and the right qualifications, and a desire to be successful, really, in all the world's your oyster at the moment. I know many, if we use an example of Indians again, are now working in Texas in the IT industry in California. And it's a great opportunity. I don't think that door was ever closed on them. But how do you get rid of persons' racist views? I don't think there's a one size fits all when it comes to that, Dom. I think it's down to the individuals themselves to be able to realize where they are and not to judge. We always, I think it's from the Bible, don't judge lest you be judged. So I think that's where I am with it. I want the person, the quality of their mind. That's really what I'm looking for. Are they kind? Are they honest? Are they hardworking? Are they a member of the team? These are the qualities I'm looking for. It doesn't matter where I find it.
I was in a process a little while ago where we were interviewing a candidate for our team, and what we decided to do was all the academic credentials, the work experience was all there to see on the CV. Of all the questions we asked the candidate in the interview, only one of them was about work related.
Yeah.
Everything else was about nothing about work, but trying to understand the person's ideologies, trying to understand how they felt about things, and the reason was to see whether they would be a best fit into our cultural mindset.
Mm-hmm. And yeah. Well, John, I had a question someone asked me the other day there. How would you manage you? And I thought, oh, that's not a question I didn't have the answer, Dom, as you probably understand. I don't know how I would be able to manage a guy like me, to be brutally honest.
I don't think anyone can, Norman.
No, I know, and I think that your question's a very fair one. I think when to provide leadership and to be a natural leader, or we can use the word leader. I've said at the start, and I still believe it. I don't think you can create great leadership, but you can make person better leaders, I think. But the characters of a great list are traits. They're not something, your ability to hit a sales target does not provide you with any skills on leadership.
Correct.
It might make you a really good manager of numbers, but that's not the same as a manager of people. And you've got to understand where that target sits within the environment.
Correct.
For me, it was never. I always wanted to achieve financial success, but it would never be at the expense of people.
Yeah. So Norman, I'm saying all these things. I want to come to the point I'm going to make next. What would be your advice to the young people coming into their working life environment? Because there's on one side they want to have the flashiest gadgets, the big car, a great house, which is nothing wrong with it, by the way. But what would you say, based on whatever we've talked so far, to the young people who've just started their working careers or are halfway through it?
Well, I can answer that question, Dom, in a way that you probably don't expect me to answer it. But I would say that if you are able to develop high morals, now that might mean something different to everybody, but if you have high moral standards, you are able, I'm sure, to get the best out of your team. Without them, and without that as a core, there's other skills that you'll need for sure. And we've discussed, empathy and responsibility and taking hard decisions. But if you do not have high moral standards at your core, I don't believe that you can be a successful leader of others.
How easy is that to do in a practical world of today?
Almost impossible, but not impossible. It's difficult if they're not there from the very beginning. If a person doesn't have them, I don't think you can teach them. I think values come from an early age, Dom. I think sometimes values come from a variety of different places. One of them, it comes from your parents. could come from your school, can come from your friends. But if you take 20 kids in a classroom, every one of them will have a different set of standards and a different set of morals, a different set of values. But to be successful as a leader, I never found it ever necessary to be tough. I can't think of the last time I lost my temper in a work environment. Maybe that's down to the individual's personality and the ability to control their emotions. I think that's important as well. There are often situations where someone in a work environment's failure to do something, leads you into a bad situation. So I think the ability to relax a little bit within the environment, allow others to have success, guide them, tutor them, encourage them. I mean, these are all things that are necessary. And we're talking about leadership, Dom. We're not talking about managing people. We're talking about leading here. So I think you have to have a core set of values. Without them, I don't think great leadership's possible. You can put the fear of God into people. You can have what's viewed as two different sorts of successes. The people that are above you could say, oh, he's successful because he hit a number. The people below you that are in a very same environment will say, I love working for Norman because he created such a great place to work. One group was happy because it was about the numbers, and the team were happy because it was about fellowship and progression and getting something from the job other than chasing a number, Dom. There was a certain amount of satisfaction and fulfillment in what we achieved there.
Yeah. So correct. Absolutely well said. So Norman, before I come to my last point, I want to ask you a question, and I don't know how you're going to answer this. If you were the CEO, say, of a pharmaceutical organization for a year, what would you do in terms of being the change maker?
I think the challenges that we've got in that particular field are enormous, between getting benefit to there's a lot of people in third world countries are denied basic medicine because they're expensive. So how do you equate the needs of the individuals across the globe to have access to complete healthcare versus the money needed to generate those tablets? Because I understand that within the pharmaceutical industry, the vast amount of, and they make huge profits, by the way, but the vast amount of upfront costs are in R&D, it's in research and development. So before a drug comes on the market, it's like a comet. You see the drug, but you don't see the whole trail of stuff that's behind it to get that drug there. It's a very demanding environment to work in pharmaceutical. There's a lot can go wrong. I mean, you've seen in the 60s when drugs arrived in the UK, thalidomide and a whole lot of others, where I guess the whole research wasn't done, and you had a whole series of kids born with defects. And perhaps that's a bad example, because the vast majority is it goes right. How would I do it? It would be difficult to balance the need to get medicine as cheap as possible with the costs associated with trying to do that. So maybe this is, I'm out there, as if the need for profit was removed somehow by having governments fund the research and development part of it. So you'd reach out to the governments or to the World Health Organization and say, look, we need to get 600 million flu jabs out there. So you would be selling them for $4, but we need them to go out at 40 cents, and we'll fund the difference. So if I was the CEO of a pharmaceutical company, there's no way I can develop the drugs without vast amounts of money being spent on research and development. You don't have to overly market them, because you're not trying to sell the drug to the consumer, you're trying to sell it within the industry, which is doctors and pharmacies. So I think the secret to this one, Dom, is to have the funding element, the funding part of it taken away, so that we have access to cheaper medicine. It would be nice one day, although I'm not sure it'll ever happen, that someone that's in the Congo or somebody that's in Bhutan or Cambodia wouldn't have to worry about their health, because the large companies and the World Health Organization and all those organizations have developed or determined a way to get affordable, and I use the word affordable because it's not possible to do it for free, but to get affordable medicine so that we can prolong life.
Yeah, I know. I said pharma because I think it's quite a unique sector. I mean, there's two elements to it. There's obviously the business side to it,
Sure.
which is important, but there's also the human side to it, which impacts lives, right?
Sure. Yeah, it's funny, Dom, how different things can influence us. I think that, and I've said it at the beginning. I guess when I knew we'd be talking about it, I was thinking, how would I develop the next group of leaders? Well, the truth is, they're already here because they know within themselves that they're capable of making decisions, and they know that they're capable of creating teams. When we talked about the pharmacy, it was a good example. When you're driven by profit, you will make the wrong decisions for the individuals because at the end of the day, it's about you making as much money for yourself as possible. And let's be brutally honest, the CEO of the pharmacy company you were talking about will make a considerable amount more in bonuses if the tablet's at 20 than he will at 10. Right. But by doing that, he actually hurts far more people. So unless you have got those moral values, the ones that I spoke about, Dom, unless it's in him, he'll never make a $4 drug. It's not in him to do it. He'll deliver 20 and he'll buy a bigger house and he'll take more expensive holidays and he'll fly first class and he'll buy a yacht. That's all he's interested in. But that's not a leadership. But that is a very good manager. That's somebody that knows how to make money for his company. But he'll be hated by just about everyone that he's encountered because of that. And he doesn't care. You see, that's why having no moral values or no moral fiber or nothing like that, he will never make the decisions that will benefit the vast majority of people. It's not in him to do it. He's unfit to lead.
Okay. Norman, this has been a great conversation about leadership and about humanity, I think so. And I think that's what makes the world a better place, not just the corporate environment. And I hope that people have this. And, just two things I want to say. I think your legacy continues, at least in our household, because the individual that you mentored is the one that I'm married to. And and when I think about all the pranks that you have pulled with her being your partner in crime, I keep on telling her, if there is a God, the two of you are going to go to hell. And that stays.
Well, I'm pretty sure I will, but I think because she was only assisting me, I think she's probably saved. But the good thing, Dom, and thank you for giving me this opportunity to also talk a little bit about leadership, because I think it's a word that gets thrown around, but it shouldn't. We should always be very clear about what good leadership is, because there's also good examples of bad leadership, and we know where that can end up. So I think having those basic values, and I'm glad to hear that people do believe that those values are instilled in you. It will allow you to make the right decisions in a work environment. I've always felt that way, and I've always been inspired with what's gone on before to make the right decisions. I would have hated it looking back if I had created an environment where people really struggled or didn't enjoy it or hated me or felt that I was a bully or any of those things. It would bother me if I hadn't done what I'd done. And the nonsense part of it was just me. I remember quite frequently going out with groups in Scotland where we have joke telling competitions. And someone might say, well, you've got to do a joke about a sheep or a dog or whatever. And everyone's now thinking about jokes. So that kind of fun, lively, humorous environment is very much part of me. But I don't think there's a Norman MacDonald outside of work and a Norman MacDonald inside work that's any different. But why should it be? Why should it be? I am pretty much the same person. I mean, I can make nonsense if I'm in a restaurant or even if I'm in a church. Or if I'm in work, it's in me to do it. If I see an opportunity, then I'll go for it. What I will do is I probably go much further than anybody else. And as my wife keeps saying, you actually don't know when to stop.
Are you a little child seeking attention, Norman?
I'm a little child that gets attention.
Okay, fair enough.
I don't seek it, but I know it will come.
Okay. So this has been great. Thank you so much for being on.
No problem.
Sharing
Thank you as well.
Imbecile wisdom with me. And thank you very much, Norman.
Anytime. Dom, all the best in regards to everybody. Thank you very much, as I say again, for this opportunity. I've really appreciated it. And if it's like the parable of the seeds, when you sow, the farmer sows the seeds, some of it will fall on fertile ground and become plants. Some will fall among the weeds and fall among the stones. So everything I say will not resonate with everybody. But I'm hoping that there are little bits of elements of this wisdom, if that's the right word, I'll use it with a small w, that will mean something to people and will make them better leaders.
Okay.